All right, Gabe, welcome to Unsupervised Learning.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Sweet. Yeah, so the reason I wanted to do this is because like every time we talk, we seem to go off into some pretty cool conversations about multiple different AI topics, about security, about ethics and stuff like that. And I just wanted to like have one of them on camera so other people can benefit from it.
Nice. Yeah.
So could you start off just by talking about what you've been working on, what your background is and stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from the Bay Area. I don't have a traditional background in computer science. I kind of crowbarred my way into information security. And I got some great opportunities to work with some very talented people. Been in the industry for about 10 years now and mostly focused on threat intelligence, but I've had the good luck to be exposed to a really wide variety of security incidents, formerly at Apple and then OpenAI, and now I'm working on my own thing. And I'm so excited to be here for this conversation because security really deeply involves ethics and safety. So very much looking forward to exploring that with you.
Yeah, very cool. So that takes us right into the first one, which really made me want to have this conversation. And it's basically around this conversation that seems to be out there around accelerationists and DCells or A cells and D cells, like all this terminology. And then like with the D cells, the extreme version of that being like doomers, which is like the term for it. And that pivots right into like Yudkowsky's arguments and stuff that he supposedly said. I'm not really sure if he actually said the stuff about the nuclear bombing and stuff like that, but he's generally very extreme around like, oh, we need to control the GPUs, right? We've got to have absolute control. This thing is going to kill us. And I'm especially thinking about his conversation with Lex on his podcast, where it was pretty bleak. And I'm just curious, like, do you think this is the right framing, the A cell versus D cell? And like, what are your overall thoughts on this? And I guess Yudkowsky's viewpoint as well.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's so hard to thread the needle on this stuff too, because the information space is just incredibly polluted. But we're in the middle of this technological renaissance. We find LLMs to be extremely useful. They have a lot of these qualities that we think are characteristics or features that arise in systems, but are not evident in the individual components of that system. We call these emergent qualities, and a lot of these qualities have gotten people to say, well, what else are these things capable of? And then, like, should we be worried about some of these capabilities? Should we be concerned? The accelerationist versus deaccelerationist groups, they're really fascinating. So, you have on one side the accelerationists, on the other side the deaccelerationists, and you think of these two groups as being very much in opposition. But in fact, it's very important to point out that both of these groups actually share the same core belief. And
Really?
that's that we're on the cusp of building this intelligence that's greater than our own, and that's fundamentally going to change humanity. Um, so they believe the same things, and
Oh, interesting. So they both believe that it's about to happen. And when we say it's about to happen, that's AGI? Is that what they're worried about?
yeah. I mean, I don't know if the accelerationists are worried much about AGI. I think they're very much welcoming it, but they believe that there is this advanced intelligence. We're getting closer and closer to creating it, and so from the accelerationist point of view, they believe it's going to bring a new era in humanity. So they're extremely optimistic about the technology. They're eager to hasten all of the benefits of those new breakthroughs. And these are like developers who want to go very fast. They want to incorporate new technologies. They're financially motivated in some cases. There's individuals who really believe that AI is going to be better at decision making than human beings, and that if we further move down the side of extreme optimism, there's those that believe artificial general intelligence is going to usher in a utopia. So these are like, that's an extreme optimistic view. And on the other side, the doomers are concerned with an extreme intelligence because they have this belief that in every case where there's been an intelligence that's smarter than the next smartest intelligence on the planet, that it works to remove that intelligence, and they're deeply concerned about about this. So this framing is basically built around the same general idea. And that idea may not be correct. We don't know how far we are from artificial general intelligence, or even if LLMs are going to allow us to achieve that. But the way that we've been having discussions about safety, about security, about the dangers and risks posed by these new technologies is all centered around these two views that people perceive as being in opposition, but actually are closer together than we might previously assume.
Interesting. So they all think it's imminent, essentially. So they're very similar in that way. Where do you fall on that? First of all, how important do you think the term AGI is versus ASI and the others?
I mean, ASI to me just sounded like a rebranding of AGI, a way of making further reinforcing like, hey, this thing isn't just going to be generally intelligent. It's going to be super intelligent. And we need people to realize just how smart it's actually going to be. So that, AGI, ASI, these are two acronyms for more or less the same thing. And, either one that you want to use they might as well be interchangeable.
Is that because once it achieves AGI, you think it's just going to move really quickly into ASI, or you just think it's a distinction without a difference?
I don't even know how helpful it is to draw a distinction around that, because we have no idea what that looks like. And so we're like trying to describe something, but we're describing it in a useful way for philosophy or for science fiction. And I really don't want to paint with too broad a brush. There's the people who are involved in this work, they do take it very seriously. I don't want to cast aspersions upon them, but they're describing something that is really hard to, it's not measurable. So it's very hard to be like concrete, or to do things like risk analysis or safety work based on this description of this thing, which is just godlike or powerful in ways that we can't comprehend.
Okay, interesting. So how much do you think the doomer mentality is really affecting things? Like we saw the drama happen on seasons 1 through 4 of the Sam Altman show recently. And how much of that was like Yudkowsky related, do you think? I mean, how much do you think Yudkowsky's ideas are having an effect on the overall space?
Well, I think it's important to separate like an individual from the ideas too, because it's not the case that like this guy was thinking like, oh, like I'm gonna like oust Sam Altman from the OpenAI.
Right.
I think that publicly, in the statements that the company has made, and just in the buzz on Twitter, which was wild for a few days, it's that there really is the sentiment that these companies are concerned about moving too fast, and that's an internal debate that happens. So they do model evaluations, they do testing, they have deployment schedules, but fundamentally there are people at these companies, and it's not just OpenAI, it's all these frontier companies who believe that the safest thing to do is to not make the model to begin with. And I think that's a real conflict, because you have these developers who are just so incentivized to make new product and to ship really quickly.
Yeah.
And you marry that up with this like extreme caution, and it just doesn't match. So you have two parts of a company going completely opposite directions. And I think that's kind of where the rubber hits the road, is in these like larger questions about like, well, what's the mission of this company? Is it achieving its mission? Or and that's where as an outside observer, that's where I saw the arguments kind of coming to head.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say I'm probably in like the, I don't know, 80% acceleration, because to me it's all a spectrum. And like going back to our original topic, I don't think there's anyone who actually is full doomer. I mean, Yudkowsky might be pretty close, but even he, I think, wants AGI to happen. Hasn't he been trying to make AGI happen for years? Like, to me, he's like somewhat pro AI, right? And there's hardly anyone who's like go as fast as possible with no brakes. So it's like to me, everyone's like on the spectrum. I'm probably like 80, 85% fast, and then with caution, which seems like it's very similar to like Altman, or at least that's how I'm interpreting it. Where would you be on a spectrum like that?
Yeah, I guess I'd want to answer that question by asking another question
Sure.
about like where are you on the spectrum of like expanding internet access, or where are you on the spectrum like if we could go back in time, back to ARPANET, and ask the question of, hey, like, can we rapidly accelerate the development of the internet? Like, would that do you think that would be a like a good call to make?
Yes. In that case, I would be like a 98%, or a 99.9%, because I wouldn't have 10% or 20% cut out for brakes and safety because I don't see the downside. Whereas here I do see more of a downside. That's why I would be more like a 75 to 85%.
Yeah. And you see the downside because the framing of the issue is one of like existential risk to society, right?
Yeah.
Like the argument on one side is it's going to kill all of us. And the argument on the other side is, oh, wow, look at this cute art that we can make using LLMs now. So
Yeah.
I just
That's
like,
actually,
this is why I think the framing is so messed up because we're just like, we're like, the conversation we're having is, oh, do you think that we should build something that could destroy society?
right. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I think too often the doomer use case is couched as the Terminator or paper clips, which is just like so played out, and it's so obvious that it's bad that it just makes everyone want to pull the brakes. I think a more realistic doomer scenario is a collection of much less bad things all like accumulating. So loss of trust in society, combined with like super empowered criminals, both in the digital space plus like really smart drones that are taking out people or whatever. Like it seems like a whole bunch of smaller stuff combined gets you to a more realistic bad place than like Terminator or whatever, or everyone becomes paperclip. So what are your thoughts on the difference between those two?
I mean, I would agree completely with that statement. The chance that we have this like truly catastrophic thing happen is very low.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't even know how to measure it. And I'm working in AI safety and being like, okay, well, like, how do we measure this thing? And the thing that you're trying to measure you can't measure it because it doesn't exist yet.
Yeah. And I want to call out for the audience that like you've spent real time working on these real problems, like at these companies, right? So it's not like theoretical. You're batting this around. You actually dealt with this stuff, so it's hard to sort of capture and encapsulate. Yeah, it's interesting that everyone wants to go to that really nasty use case. I really much prefer a threat model approach where we could actually write them down. Like when you write down the thing and you say, okay, the worst case, best case, what are some examples of it going wrong? What are some mitigations? To me, you're not really having a logical conversation until you lay that out, right? And to me, it's fairly easy to do that for like autonomous drones that can't be hit by EMPs, or deep fakes go really crazy and people can't trust the politics. Like even those are really complex, but at least you can write them down. But it's like, oh, super AGI turns everyone into paper clips. It just seems way too science fiction-y.
It's a thought experiment, and it's a
Yeah.
useful one insofar as it's like, well, how do you model something that you can't predict? Which is like, that's great. Like, what are all the worst case scenarios? Let's see if we can think of all of them, and then hopefully we'll be able to avoid creating something that's capable of all this stuff. Um, one of the positive things to come out of that was deceptive AI. Like it can you create models that deceive people or deceive certain people but don't deceive other people. Like
Yeah.
there's there's some really promising research there, but that framing is framing of approaching a problem to say, well, what's the worst case scenario? It's not, like you can't use that to conduct business. You can't use that to build products. it's really more of a philosophical belief system to engage in. And to your point about threat modeling, like how do people who work in disaster relief do this? You know,
Right.
they make the threat model and then they like figure out where all the resources are that they would need, and they're like, okay, well, let's make sure we have a plan to address this if it does happen.
Yeah.
Which I think is, you know, the best that we can do.
Yeah. And would you agree that basically if something gets really, really bad, where it's like it's tricking all humanity, it's building robots, you know, it's siphoning off our resources, it's doing something that's really heading towards like Yukowski bad, there's so many opportunities for us to detect and stop that, aren't there?
Yeah,
It's
and
like
I
the,
mean, like, how, like, do we think that's going to happen immediately? Like,
well, and the more
it's
immediate it is, the easier it is to detect, right? I mean, it seems like
yeah.
we would have opportunities to notice this. We've never seen like anything successfully just go from idea to it works without having so many failures. And it seems like each one of those failures could be loud and just like cause us to turn it off in like a less dangerous mode.
I mean, that's a great point. To add to that, just think of the incentives of like companies or even just random developers who are working with LLMs. Their incentive is towards hype, like positive hype,
Yeah.
negative hype. They're both useful to them. Like if, oh, something's so incredible that we must fear it, wow, it must be pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
wow, something's so incredible that it does all of our work for us, like that's even better. Great.
Yeah.
But you know, like there's no like moderate middle ground that people can fall onto, because there's very little incentive for people to say, hey, like here's where these models fail, or to come out and be like, this is like, we tested these and we think they're really good at this, but boy do they suck at this stuff. And
Yeah.
like nobody's going to want to release that, because it's not, it doesn't, it doesn't, there's no incentive to do that. There's some incentive from, you know, like public institutions, researchers who are testing capabilities, but you know, that they're kind of like small in this environment,
Mhm.
where, you know, like only the most pitched voices are receiving the attention.
Yeah. That makes sense. So where do you see like really practical current instantiations of AI tooling right now? Like what have you seen where you're like, okay, they get it. They're actually making something good.
Yeah. So I say this a lot to people. I have a course that I teach. I have, uh, I, and I say all the time, find discrete tasks that you can automate away. Find a discrete task that you can describe to an individual,
Hmm.
and then take that and turn that into an automation using an LLM. I think those are the the most basic, the easiest to do. It immediately shows people what the value of these tools are in a very personal way, because it's a task that you no longer have to do. And it also shows the value in, you know, a way that you can measure, because you can say, okay, well, how did it do on task performance this week versus last week?
Hmm.
Um, I think that the current driver behind most AI tools that we see on the market today is just rapid commercialization. There's a huge push towards trying to, you know, develop chatbots for everything. It's like everybody in their third quarter got the memo that
Yeah.
said, hey, I need AI in this product right now. And they're like, oh, I'll just sprinkle a little chatbot on there. Oh, let me make
Yeah.
it a little
But yeah.
better. And like that's not great, because it's it represents like a misunderstanding of what the technology is capable of. It represents just, you know, the easiest veneer of business win, and it also doesn't like bring out the real value of some of these tools in places like advanced science or education or healthcare. I mean, when I teach this course, I tell people, pull up, you know, the LLM chatbot right next to you, because any question that you're going to ask me, you can probably just ask it and you'll get a better response faster. We won't
Yeah.
waste class time. And then you can just like, their questions get so much more specific.
Hmm.
I've done the course with that. I've done the course without that. And it's, it's so much better. Like just as a basic education tool.
Yeah. That makes sense. So I like this idea of chatbot versus task. Because you're right, and it's been very frustrating to me. Everyone just thinks AI is ChatGPT, and specifically when they think I'm bringing AI to my product, they think a chatbot that somehow answers questions about the product. And it's like, that it, like you said, it's so surface. So give me an example of some tasks. What are some granular tasks or pipelines or workflows that you think could really use help here?
Yeah. Well, one of them is just bringing context. So, like, let's take the case of like a security operations center, and you have your SOC analyst, you have your L1 SOC analyst, and they're sitting in a chair looking at alerts and trying to triage them. And for everybody who's been there, who's done that job, you never have enough context about the alerts that you're getting. Like, you can
Mhm.
always have a little bit more context.
Yeah,
And boy, would it be great to be able to ask a follow-up question without having to escalate before you cut a ticket that needs to be triaged. Um, there's so many opportunities to put LLMs into workflows to say, okay, like, you're doing, like, we flagged that this command was suspicious, but now it's up to the analyst to interpret why it's suspicious. And that analyst may not have context for the operating system the command's running on,
mhm.
or the part of the business that specific box is in, or even just uh, the like, who's running this, what time was it, like, that's all
Yeah,
stuff that they have to pick up and then do the analysis themselves, and that takes a lot of time. And it's so helpful just to have an LLM in there where you feed the data to, and you're like, okay, like, when the analyst is looking at this, what's a summarization of the things that have happened? And, like,
mm,
given this operating environment and these alert structures, like, is this an alert that's high priority or low priority? The
yeah,
LLM is going to nail that, and it's going to have the context based on the data that it's given. And just that little bit of optimization takes so much of a cognitive load off of your analyst. And there's more complex ones you can make too. Data retrieval is probably the biggest area of innovation right now in terms of LLMs, because everybody has a bunch of siloed data, and the the value of the LLM is that people can ask natural language questions and then have those be interpreted into either queries, searched in an embedding space, and pull back the necessary documentation that they need, so that their query and the documentation can both be run at inference. And that just provides a very tailored but grounded answer for the individual. I mean, this is stuff that businesses all over the world are like, wow, like, I've got a lot of data. Boy, it would be great if I could access it more easily.
yeah. No, absolutely. I think everyone's struggling to get this. I think being able to fully articulate and granularly articulate all the different tasks that a business has, I feel like that's pre-consulting that they're going to need to do. 'Cause it's almost like they don't know what to apply AI to. They don't know what the AI could do. They also don't know what to apply it to. Because I feel like a lot of businesses don't have their specific tasks and workflows like broken out. Whereas if they were to do that, they'd be like, holy crap, I've got 39 of these. I really, I would love to have context here or the ability to ask questions here. It's so ripe for somebody to come in and just like build that for them. And I'm sure many companies are doing that, many consultancies are doing that. I just wonder what the quality level is. Um, and so sort of building on that, if you take like an average security program and you've got threat intel, you've got detection response, you've got all these different areas, endpoint security, corporate security. What sections can benefit the most from this? And like, what are some of the tasks or workflows within them that you think are like the ripest?
So any task that can be modeled as a runbook for an individual to pursue can be modeled for an LLM. And when you think about it in this way, like, if you ask somebody in management, like, oh, like, what are all the processes that your team does that could be automated? That person is going to give a terrible answer. But if you
Yes.
grab the individual who's working with those processes and you say, what do you find yourself doing every single day that you
Yes.
wish you could automate? That person will know exactly what to say. They'll say it to you, and then they'll tell you another one, and then they'll tell you another one after that.
Yes.
And so, like, for all the consultants out there who are doing this work, like, please just go find the people who actually have the processes to automate, give them access to, an LLM to, encourage them to experiment with it. You only pay in tokens. You're not onboarding another staff member, but suddenly that person who has to do that task every day has unlimited interns, just
Yes.
unlimited amount of interns that they can task. So, you know, the I think the model here that companies are going to struggle to implement is that the automations that are going to give them the most wins are going to come from the bottom up and not from the top down.
Mm. So say more about that.
Yeah, you have companies who say, oh, well, we want, all of our documents to be, we have documents in like 5 different, silos, and we want them all to be in the same place. So like, what is our AI strategy here? Do we like tell all these people to sanitize their data and send it to us? Like, what do we do? And, it's the question that I always pose back is, well, what is the problem that you're actually trying to solve? Like, are
Yes.
you trying to solve like data availability? Well, what teams are constantly being asked to provide data to make it available? And in those cases, like, what does an 80% solution look like? Because that's what you're going to get with the LLM. You're going to get like an 80% solution, and then you make another 80% solution, and then you make another 80% solutions.
Mm.
And suddenly you have something that's really robust and that you can count on. But it's improving a human process.
Yeah. So you're one of the best threat intel people that I know. So give me an example of a threat intel task that this could apply to.
Collections and analysis, like when you start when you start working in threat intel, you usually find yourself having a specific area of expertise, and people will come to you and be like, oh, what's this community talking about? What's this community talking about? How are these people interpreting this? What are these threat actors that you specifically study doing? Having a good collections and analysis program means you have to have a lot of different perspectives within threat intelligence to be able to
Mm.
cover a lot of different ground. One of the things that LLMs do really well is they take priority intelligence requirements and apply that over arbitrary data. So you have a lot of text in your collections program. You're ingesting a lot of external threat data. Well, what are your PIRs? Because if you have those modeled somewhere, then you can apply them automatically to the data. And now suddenly it's not like a game of indicator matching, or analysts writing a bunch of very bespoke queries that they have to check all the time. It's suddenly this like more broad, like, hey, this matched with one of our PIRs, and this is the thing that we need a human to go look at now. And when they look at that thing, they look at it with all of the context that like came in the collections
Yeah.
pipeline, all of the matches with internal data sets. Like, connecting those dots is so much easier. And all you've done is basically reduce the task of reading and summarization, which I think are just these core capabilities that we keep skipping over. But we don't realize, like, oh, this is a thing that people do all the time. They read and summarize data for us.
No, I love that. Don't you have a project around this, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. I wrote kind of like a proof of concept script for this up on my GitHub.
Do you have it? Can you share? And all right, cool. So you wrote this tool and you have it on GitHub, and you actually have a recording here of it running. Is that right?
Yeah, so this was an example video I put together, just to kind of like show functionality. That's probably the easiest way to walk through it, so we don't have to do a live demo.
Okay.
So I'm gonna play. It was called Auto Analyst, and it's for arbitrary file evaluation and summarization.
Okay. So when it says auto analyst, what analyst is that? What kind of analyst?
So it really depends. It's data dependent. So your analyst is going to be whatever whatever the best analyst to analyze that data will be. And this is automations with LLMs supplant labor intensive and context sensitive analysis. That's what this is. It's saying like, hey, like we can preserve context so that we know like which analyst we should choose, and we can make it a lot less labor intensive because we can have the LLM read all of our data as opposed to our human analyst.
Okay. So you're saying you send it arbitrary data and it figures out what type of analyst would be best for analyzing it, and then it writes. What does it do based on that?
So a few things happen. The first thing that happens is we send it this file, with whatever text we have in it, and then there's some static analysis of the file, which is like file name, um, and like what the character encoding is, how many lines of the file it is, total word count, whatever. And then we also have the model take a look at, like, well, what is the data itself? So we have it sample the data to say what is it. In this case, what we're looking at is a bunch of 911 calls. These are fictitious 911 calls. And we've got about 490 lines of them. And they have the call ID, timestamp, speaker, and text. So think of it as
Okay.
just like a CSV file that's full of these 911 calls.
Okay.
So if you were going to analyze this, you'd be like, okay, well, maybe I would like break them up by timestamp, or maybe I'd try and apply like some NLP to them so that I could tag them. Like, there's all these different types of approaches that you might take. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to send this to the application and ask it to like pick the right analyst.
Okay.
We'll skip ahead here for you. All right, so we drag over the file. All right, it's got the file name, file size. It's got the character set. And now if we scroll down right here, which should do in a second, we can see the file analysis. So in this case, it's saying, hey, like the data in this file contains records of emergency and non-emergency dispatch calls. So the model sampled the data in order to come to this conclusion. It also says, hey, the data was sourced from dispatch logs, and the required expert to respond to this is an incident responder or a collections analyst. It has indicators about that it wants to like collect. So things like immediate health issues, security concerns, location-specific distress cases, and then it has analysis considerations. And so what it does is it uses the summarization of the file to write two prompts for MapReduce. They're both dynamically generated based on the data within the file. And they're essentially looking at, one of them looks at the indicators and the other looks at the analysis considerations. So go over all of the dispatch logs, look at those indicators, then go over all of the summaries and make this unified intelligence brief. So here we have the summarization report, and it's several paragraphs long, and it's just summarizing like, hey, like what happened during this like 1 day of dispatch calls? You had 490 calls today. Like, go through them and tell me the ones that I care about based on the indicators.
Wow, really cool. So it's better than just sending this to like an AI or ChatGPT or whatever, because it wouldn't have that step of like putting its perspective into a particular role based on the initial analysis. Yeah,
Yeah.
really cool.
And it's also really benefiting from like our knowledge of what does like a good analysis look like, because we've provided it to the model in the form of prompts and said, hey, like when you write this analysis, write it in this way. And it writes its own code to generate it. So it's like writing Python on the fly and then executing that in the course of running the script. So it's really like taking all the steps together.
Wow, that is really cool. Yeah, and you
Yeah.
could do this for like threat intel. You could do this for all sorts of things, right?
Yeah. I mean, the initial goal was to really showcase the capabilities of putting different LLM capabilities together. So if you have few shot prompting, how do you get the most out of few shot prompting? If you have MapReduce, how do you get the most out of MapReduce? And how do you like build a really like dead simple tool? This one took me like, I don't know, a day. And it's like, oh, I wish I had this when I was working in threat intelligence. Like this was like this would be like the core functionality of any first level threat intelligence analyst role. It's like, hey, read all this stuff and tell me what I care about.
Wow. And so have you run it with threat intel use cases? Like, what does that look like? What would some example inputs and outputs look like?
Oh yeah, we run it with threat intel use cases. We ran it with like command line arguments, network telemetry data. In the case of threat intel, we used 3 months of chat logs. We have up to 2 years of chat logs, but we parsed it out into 3-month chunks. So 3 months of chat logs that leaked from the Conti ransomware group.
Mm,
And these are all in Russian. So I don't read Russian,
mhm.
but we're asking the model, like, hey, here's my priority intelligence requirement as it relates to ransomware. And here's 3 months of leaked chat logs. Like, go through and look in each section, like look for my priority intelligence requirements, summarize them for me if they exist there, and then build me a summary of all those individual summaries. So now I have, priority intelligence requirements mapped over 3 months of chat logs, and then it's distilled into only the information that I really need to, make a decision.
Wow, that's really cool. And what's the name of this project?
So this one, I think I just called it Auto Analyst.
Hmm.
Um, but it's the code is on GitHub. So
Yeah,
it's
we'll share that. Yeah,
yeah, github.com/avogabos, AVOGABOS. And that's just the app isn't there, but the code that you need, all the pieces you need to put it together are. And please you be my guest to go there and use it.
very cool. Well, this has been fantastic. Where can people follow your work?
I'm on Twitter. I guess I'm posting a little bit more lately, but Gabe Incognito on Twitter, easy way to find me. And yeah, if you have any questions, interest in AI, interest in security, I would love to talk to you. So yeah, please reach out.
All right. Well, let's look forward to the next one, and can't wait to talk to you soon.
Yeah, likewise. This has been a lot of fun, man.
All
Looking
right. Take
forward to
care.
it. Bye.